It's October, so it's time for something spooky. Let's dive into Resident Evil. When you think of Resident Evil, what runs through your mind? The classic PlayStation 1 games with tank controls, where you died in the first section because the game does not explain how to play, like I did my first playthrough, or the weird movies that had cultural influence during the zombie kind of meta period of filmmaking, like Resident Evil and 28 Days Later, or even looking at The Walking Dead, or how its influence on gaming as a whole with innovative gameplay elements that we see to this day, such as QuickTime events. All of these played a role in your favorite franchise and more as we look into this a bit more for the horror aspect. And here's why Resident Evil matters. Spoilers ahead for Resident Evil, and if you like the content, let me know in the comments below, because these do take time to make, so thank you. I wouldn't mind making this a full-time job. I appreciate you. When looking into survival horror, most people gravitate towards the franchise Resident Evil, made by Capcom, as their first real experience. It was mine when I rented Resident Evil 2 back at Blockbuster, roughly around 96, 97. When Final Fantasy 7 came out, got our PlayStation 1. Those were definitely the times when you can go to Blockbuster and rent your games. However, horror games back then were not as tension building as they are now. And when we look at this, we're going back into the 80s or 90s of how horror was more of a catalyst to promote gore and blood. We knew this stuff wasn't scary. Like, we'd look it up on the screen. It was shown on a TV, and with the animation looking like a mess of meshed pixels or awkward polygons running around. It just didn't really incorporate any aspect of what fear represents. The scariest part of these games would be the music that would kick in, giving you that dread. Like, for example, the Yellow Devil fight from Mega Man 1. God, that music was so bad. And honestly, it was just stressful. Like, it wasn't even really spooky. But Resident Evil changed that, as it was the first to really show us an environment that we could potentially find believable. This was also this kind of catalyst with during the 90s, when you had shows such as X-Files, where you had these fictitious stories, but due to the conspiracy theory and us wanting to believe that this made-up world was real, it was shocking that you found this environment to be believable. This was done by what's known as atmosphere. Atmosphere, a pervading tone or mood of a place, situation, or work of art. And no, this is nothing to do with the atmosphere of the planet Earth. You're 10 years old, you're 12, you're 18, you're a child, even in your mid-early 20s, you probably have a home near where you live that is like the spooky home. You've never been in it, but you know it's the spooky home, it's the scary home, it's the place that... Just thinking about a house you've never been in and the unknown dangers that lurk in every room, and when you're learning more about the environment, you learn it was not just a spooky, scary place, a mansion as in Resident Evil 1, but there's so much more to that, and how it was shown through its gameplay. Just by thinking about that house that you've never been in, with the unknown dangers such as zombies, hunters, random bioweapons that don't make any sense other than the scarcity of a few notes that give you a brief explanation of some of the weirdness that's happening here, atmospherically would creep somebody out, because you wouldn't know what was going to happen next. You could die in the next room. In addition, so the whole premise of that game is that it built up tension through atmosphere. This was complemented by the restrictive inventory system and how we were locked in the holding limited amount of gear or items. Like, 6 inventory slots is barely anything. But when we compare it to games at that time, like look at Final Fantasy VII, look at even Mario 3, where you had access to lists of inventory of items that you could tackle to access at any time, and this game took that away. It said, hey, you have to make a decision. You have to think of what you're going to do. Players were able to collect power-ups, their items, have anything they needed on demand, and that was the norm. There was no stress there was no stress about this. You had access to whatever you needed, whenever you wanted to, and you were fine. But in Resident Evil, they changed this. They added a layer of stress to the player by making them have to make a decision. Do I go into the next room with 2 guns, ammo, and a healing item with 1 inventory slot left just for a key item that I might find? Or do I go in, guns a-blazing first, kill everything, go back, but maybe something will spawn, I don't know. Or do I go in with the bare minimum and try to YOLO my way into the next room that I don't know what's in there, hoping it's the way to go, kind of like speedrunner style. And how you played it mattered. That built that tension, that built that atmosphere, that built the aspect of what made this game so memorable. How you played this game overall, how you played the game mattered, and it affects how you manage to beat it. If you manage to beat it at all with 5 healing items and a bazooka, or endanger the rest of the last third and you have 2 handgun bullets, you don't know. Now we'll look into how the story is told. The storytelling. And we can be absolutely blunt here. The story for this game is kind of ridiculous. Like, let's be real. Albert Wesker planning people to get trapped in a mansion to collect data so Umbrella can make money. Yeah, that's kind of like, there's better writing than that. But what's more important is how the story is told, and why it's a game that many players tend to gravitate back to or go back to. And this has to do with the time frame of when this was. So back in the 90s, video games were still being treated with the similar beat points as if you were in a movie. You have your main plot, and you have your hero who has to overcome the problem, learns to make changes to develop as a character, and then using those new skills to overcome new challenges to repeat until the game ends, until the story ends. And at times, and eventually they'll save the day. Sounds like your normal Marvel script right now. But Resident Evil has these similar points. This is where it gets controversial, because one can argue that Chris is main canon, but Jill's story has some key points that matter in the franchise. So for the sake of convenience, this is how I interpret it, is that Chris and Jill's events happened at the same time, at least through the storytelling parts. Just a video game has to video game, and so if you explore the same rooms and get the same key items, whatever. I always imagine that Chris explores one side and Jill explores the other, and then they both kind of cross, and that's just what happens, but whatever. This video game is, and for the year it was made, an interactive movie. I'll debate you in the comments below if you want to fight me on this. Let's go. But your main character has a goal of exploring this spooky mansion, trying to solve some weird mystery, like the Scooby-Doo game. You are playing the role of the person you pick, Jill or Chris, because this game plays out more like a movie. The story is the key component about why people play this game. You are the character living through these experiences, reading about the notes, overcoming the challenges, and the beats of this movie are you essentially becoming Chris or Jill. Well, let me ask you this then. Like, what is your favorite movie? Okay, well, why? Like, is it the plot? Is it the story? Is it the characters? Some reason is causing you to go back to it, and that is why you like it. Resident Evil plays out very similarly, where it is premised about you reliving these experiences, telling a story about the Spencer State Mansion. Resident Evil is the same. In its core, it is a horror movie that you get to interactively explore and learn about this world of Raccoon City. It's the same reason people enjoy the same beat points of a movie such as Die Hard or any Marvel adventure movie or any movie at all. It's, you know what's going to happen. You know how the movie ends. You know good guy wins, bad guy loses, the building blows up, but you remember these beats and the emotional attachment that is tied to that. And for Resident Evil, that aspect is fear of the unknown. But it's the journey that you get to experience along the way, in addition to the aspects of living in fear that you don't know what's going to happen. I challenge you to go back. If you've played this game before, go back and replay the original if you haven't played it in a while. I can guarantee you're not going to remember everything, but the story's going to pull you back in, and you probably will forget about a hunter in a room, and it will kill you. You remember it's there. Resident Evil as a franchise has changed over the years. We look at Resident Evil 5, 6, 7, and it's no longer as emphasis on movie points with a mysterious background, with the movie style mystery that we grew up with, that promoted fear through its gameplay and atmosphere, but it did birth the idea of how a game story and how fear in a creative medium can be presented. Atmosphere matters, and this can't be told any better than Five Nights at Freddy's. As that game is very basic with how it designs fear, but its atmosphere, its tension is what makes players come back. Resident Evil gave us fear in gaming, like actual legitimate fear of not knowing what was in the next room, fear that if we're not going to get past the final boss in danger mode with 3 handgun bullets, fear of watching that countdown on the top of the screen as the timer gets closer to 0 while we battle with final boss Tyrant that we might have not even discovered was a boss until we played it through the true ending. Resident Evil is more than a game, but it's the aspect or the creation of fear in gaming, and without it, horror games to this day wouldn't be what they are. We'd probably have a lot more Splatterhouse or Jaws. Ooh. So if you agree with me, if you disagree, let me know in the comments below. And this is why Resident Evil matters. Thank you for watching, and have a spooky night. Take it easy. And if you like the content, consider subscribing.